Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex McIntyre. I'm the Menlo Park City Manager, and I've enjoyed this position for a little over 3 years. This is my third budget I will be presenting to the community, to the City Council. It's the largest budget that you will see, and we're going to walk you through a couple of aspects of municipal budgeting as well as what our specific budget says tonight. We have a whole series of presentations for you, so we ask you to bear with us. We do want you to feel comfortable asking questions. I prefer you wait until the right time to ask the questions. You'll see when that is. I'm going to not embarrass anyone here, but unfortunately I think my staffing outnumbers the guests here by about 5 to 1. And I want you all to know no one is here on overtime. They're all here on salary, so it doesn't matter. Well, there's a handful. Nonetheless, just a couple of quick announcements. We do have Spanish language interpretation for any of those who might want it, and so hopefully others will come in and want it. We also have food in the back, so please feel free to avail yourself of something to drink or something to eat. I actually think I know every one of you in the room, so I'm glad to say that. Why don't we get started? I'm going to introduce the city's finance director, who's been with us for a little over 2 years, if my research was right. A little under 2 years. He's more exact in the numbers than I am. You'll find that to be the case. Drew Corbett is city's finance director. He's going to walk you through a little bit about municipal budgeting. Then we're going to go into the meat and potatoes of this specific proposed budget for you tonight. So,
good evening, everybody. As Alex mentioned, I'm Drew Corbett. I'm the city's finance director. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to start this off with really an introduction to municipal budgeting. So, what does the city of Menlo Park do? We provide services, right? In the simplest of terms, we're a service provider. We provide lots of services. Police, planning, building permitting, engineering. And I'm going to run through these quickly because all the departments are going to tell you about what kind of services they provide. But we've got traffic and transportation, street maintenance, we have a water utility, recreation, library services, and administration. Okay? While we provide a lot of services, there are a lot of things we don't do. We don't provide K-12 education. Residents in the city of Menlo Park are served by 5 different school districts, 4 elementary districts, and 1 high school district. We also don't provide fire protection services. That is also provided by a special district that serves Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, and Atherton. Core social services is also not under the city's umbrella. Those are typically provided by the county. It's the San Mateo County provides those services. And then things like electricity and natural gas are provided by the private sector, the PG&Es of the world. And then sewer services are provided by special agencies. And one of the things I wanted to point out about this, not only does the city not do these things, is each of these bodies, except for, say, PG&E, but for education, for fire protection, for social services, all of these agencies have an elected governing body that makes their spending decisions for that. So we have, not only do we not provide a service, we have a jurisdiction over these agencies either. Now, briefly, there are a lot of overlapping services. The city has parks, there's one right out here. The county has parks, right? But they're maintained separately, right? There's the Menlo Park Police that serve the city of Menlo Park, and then there's the county sheriff, which serves unincorporated areas of the county and then also contracts with other cities. Menlo Park residents could be served by one of 3 different water districts. The Menlo Park district, the district under the city's control, only serves a small number of residences overall. And then there's the city library, there's the county library system. So lots of overlapping services, which makes things sometimes difficult to say who's doing what. How do we pay for all this? In simplest of terms, about half of it's tax funded and about half of it's fees and charges for services. We do get some money from other governments in terms of grants from the county, the state, the federal government, and we have a small sliver of that pie is for other revenues, such as leases or interest earnings on the funds that we're holding. But generally speaking, we're funded by taxes and charges for services. How do we keep track of all this? I don't want to get into the details of fund accounting because I don't want to put everyone to sleep so early in the evening, but the point I want to make here is we get revenues from a lot of different sources. In some cases, what I would call them general purpose revenues. So property tax is a general purpose revenue. Sales tax is a general purpose revenue. So we can do with that money whatever we wish. Some revenues, however, and I'll go into detail, are for specific purposes. And when that's the case, they go into specific funds and they can only be used for that purposes. So we have to keep all of our funds separate. And so I'm going to talk about the general fund and the water fund and then a couple of our special revenue funds to illustrate that point in a few minutes. So this is the general fund, and these are our general fund revenues. largest general fund revenue source is property taxes. A full third of our general fund is property tax. Okay? And the next biggest slice is 29% is fees and charges. Okay? But overall, as I mentioned, citywide, we're about half tax funded, about half service charge funded. The general fund is 60% tax funded, another 30% from fees and charges, and the 10% is all the remaining revenues that we bring in. I want to talk about a couple of our main general fund revenue sources as well. So property tax, I mentioned, is our largest general fund revenue source. Okay? Prop 13, way back in 1978, established a 1% rate for property tax. It also established the property tax distribution of that 1%. The 12% sliver is what Menlo Park gets. So for every dollar of property tax that's paid, the city of Menlo Park is 12%. The fire protection district gets 16%. The elementary school districts get 17%. High school district 16%. The county gets 24%. And then the remaining 15% is spread amongst the other small districts within the jurisdiction. So again, that's how property taxes is distributed. And like I mentioned earlier, each of these agencies have its own elected governing body that determines how it spends those funds. But the city takes, of every dollar of property tax, we get 12%. Sales tax is another large revenue source for us. And sales tax in San Mateo County is 9%. Okay? The city gets a small portion of that. So if I go to Staples and buy a pack of pens, those pens cost me $10. I pay 90 cents in sales tax, so my total bill is $10.90. The city of Menlo Park gets a dime of that in sales tax. The rest of it's split up between the state of California, which gets the bulk of it, and then San Mateo County, which gets about 1.5%. Expenditures. So this is our expenditure chart by the departments. And I'm simplifying because I'm saying some are tax and some are fees. And it's definitely a simplification there because everyone in the general fund is at least partially tax supported. And the ones that are predominantly tax supported do generate some fees. But in general terms, our police, the library, and city administration is predominantly tax funded. Community services and community development are predominantly fee funded. And the idea there is things that benefit the entire community are generally going to be tax funded, whereas things that benefit a small number of users are typically going to be fee funded. And then public works is definitely a mixed bag. They've got a good portion of both tax funding and funding from service fees. So this is a different slice of the general fund. Same amount of money, just sliced differently. The big piece of the pie is personnel costs. 2/3 of our general fund expenditures are personnel. As I mentioned, we provide services, and services are people. Okay? This looks very much like most other jurisdictions. You would look at their general fund budget, you would find their personnel costs are the largest chunk by far of general fund expenditures. And then the other things that we do, we also pay for outside services. We pay for contract services for certain things. And then we also have to buy things to support our operations, such as paying for utilities and the other goods and services that we need to run our operation. So that's the general fund. Now I want to talk about the water fund. Okay? The water fund is funded by user fees. Okay? And in order to change rates for water rates for residents and businesses, those rates have to be approved by City Council and their public noticing requirements. So we can't just change those rates without public noticing and without approval of the council. And the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, these are special revenues for special purposes. They can't be used for anything else. So user charges for water are used for water only. They're kept in a separate fund. We can't use them for any other purpose. We can't use them to fund the library. We can't use them to fund recreation programs. They're for water only. In addition to the water fund, we have we have over 20 special revenue funds. As I mentioned, we get a lot of different revenues in from very specific sources, and they can be used for very specific purposes. So you look outside at Commonwealth Development, they pay what's called developer impact fees. They pay impact fees for transportation, construction. And what those fees are intended to do are mitigate the impact of the development that's going on. We keep all of those funds in separate places, and we account for them all differently. And for those particular funds, they're actually subject to annual reporting requirements. The State Assembly has indicated that when you charge a development impact fee, you have to report out on it annually about what you bring in, what you're spending it on, and how quickly you're going to spend it and on what, so you're not sitting on that money. We also charge, or actually the voters voted for assessment fees. So I talked about your property tax being 1%, but if you look at your property tax bill, it's actually going to be more than 1% because of special assessments and because of other bonded indebtedness that you voted for. So anytime you voted for an assessment on yourself, it goes onto your property tax bill, so you're paying a little bit more. And in our case, we have assessment fees for landscape and tree and for sidewalks. So you're paying for that, and the city's providing those services, but those revenues are kept separate and they can only be used for that purpose. And then finally, most taxes are general purpose taxes, but there are some that are very specific. So when you pay the gas tax, not sales tax on gasoline, but when you pay the gas tax that's on the fuel that you purchase, it's called the highway users tax. The highway users tax can only be used to fund roads. And each year, we have to provide a report to the state to indicate what we did with the gas tax money that the state sent us. So they send us X amount of dollars, we tell them what we did with it. So again, there's safeguards to ensure that the revenues that we're bringing in are used for the purposes that they were intended for. And then finally, I just want to talk about our annual process to budget. It starts in January with the city council goal setting. So they set the tone for what their priorities are, and then we look over the next several months to put the budget together based on what their priorities are. And best case scenario, which is the case that Alex will talk a little bit more about, is we're able to fund core services and fund council goals. In May, which we just released the budget to the public, next Tuesday night we'll have a public hearing to take public comment on the budget, and then 2 weeks later we're scheduled for budget adoption. And with that, with the general overview of the budget, I'm going to turn things back over to Alex to introduce the 2015-16 proposed budget, unless there are questions.
Great. Thank you, Drew. And we'll take questions certainly later on about this as well. That was really meant to be an overview, sort of a finance 101 on how a budget is created. Now I'm going to show you the budget we did create. And this is going to the council next Tuesday night. And I'll walk through with you the process ahead. City manager is charged, among other things, with presenting and recommending to the council a proposed budget. It's based upon what we anticipate getting in revenues and what those expenditures are, and also based upon council's priorities, community needs, and whatnot. So we build this budget in anticipation of the council theoretically adopting it, but there's a process. The public has opportunities to weigh in to say, wait a minute, we don't want that, we want this. Council ultimately makes the decision, which is why it's called the city manager's budget at this point, and it becomes the council's and the community's budget when they adopt it. So I have a budget message that I put in that tries to explain the 200 pages of numbers that are there, because the numbers are daunting, the numbers are boring, the numbers are overwhelming at times. But basically what I try to do in the budget message is explain what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get there. The budget message is unfortunately probably 10 pages long, but at least it's better than reading the full 200 pages. My theme this year is time to invest. And the theory here is we need to start investing in our community. We need to be investing in some of the projects going on because we find ourselves somewhat backlogged, and the council has agreed to this in concept. And the council has asked us to continue to fund core services. And core services are basically defined as things like police services, recreation services, the library, certain administrative type functions that you would expect the city to provide. There are other services as well that may or may not be defined as core. They might be considered discretionary or luxurious, and I don't think we have any luxurious services at this point. Our investment, though, is really about trying to meet the demand that has been presented to us by the community. And we have to staff up to meet that demand. Again, what Drew had mentioned to you all before was we are a service organization, and our goal is to provide services. So how do we do that? I'm going to walk you through this here. The budget also this year reflects the rather robust economy. I mean, Menlo Park, Silicon Valley is on fire financially. It is amazing. The value of land, the cost of services, and the cost to run an organization is at an all-time high. And we need to have the resources focused in order to deliver those services. The biggest #1 service we're backed up on right now is development. This has been a common theme for me for 3 years. We have a lot of activity going on, and unfortunately, only a narrow amount of opportunity to provide it. If I only have 10 staff members who need to do the work of 100, guess what? The work's going to slow down. What we're trying to do is open the pipeline, and you'll see how we're going to do that. To do so, though, requires us to use reserve funds. Requires the city to go into its savings account to be able to pay for the needs now so that we can grow into the future. And by grow, I'm talking financial growth. I'm going to be very clear on that. Don't feel overwhelmed by this. I'm going to explain what this is to you. What you have here is 5 years of budget numbers. We go back 2 years and we look forward 3 years. And what we're showing you is in the past 2 years, in the 2013-14 fiscal year, which was last year, we took in almost $5 million more than we spent. We took in $5 million more than we spent. So we put that into the savings account. This year, we anticipate taking in a little over $2 million more than we're planning on spending. So now we're up to about $7 million of, call it, excess savings, operating surplus. There's lots of terms for it, but the savings account grew dramatically. What I'm saying, and I'm going to present to the council next week, is we need to start spending some of those funds from the prior 2 years. And how we plan to do that is this year, in order to have a balanced budget, legally I have to show a balanced budget. We're going to use 1.2 million of those reserves to balance the budget this year. Next year, about 1.6 million to balance those, excuse me, I said balance those reserves, balance the budget. And then in the 2017-18 year, we're anticipating spending about $1 million in reserves. Interestingly, after all of that, after the 5 years, we will still have a $3.1 million, call it excess revenue to the savings account. A city that runs perfectly well, basically, takes in $10 million and spends $10 million. You don't necessarily drop money into your savings account every year, unless that's a design. So again, we're doing better. Revenue-wise, we're taking in more than we can spend. But the goal here isn't to spend money frivolously. The goal here is to spend money on very targeted efforts. And in this case, it's development. Again, we're a service-driven organization. To provide the service, particularly in this economy, we need to own the employees. We need to have the employees on staff. What we are looking at doing this year is increasing our head count by basically 20 employees. Most of those employees will be in engineering, public works, and planning and permitting. There's a balance basically in what I'll call important supporting roles, but certainly critical roles. It takes us up to 20 positions. Unprecedented in this community. Absolutely. And having said all that, the goal here really is to get through a 3-year development process so that at the end, the city is financially stronger and on a robust continuation of growth. And I think that's a very appropriate goal for a city manager to try to get his council to buy into. And I think I can do so. However, all this does not go without certain sort of warnings to ourselves and to the council, to the community. Revenues, we sit and we tend to be conservative with our revenue estimates, but we try to be as realistic as possible. A couple of areas where our revenues are struggling is our sales tax. We used to be a very strong sales tax community where we had car dealerships. We lost those a decade ago, and we've never really recovered from that. We continue to be less and less dependent on sales tax as a significant revenue source for us. You may recall Drew's comment about property taxes as really our bread and butter. We have a utility users tax we charge, and most utility users taxes are something that would grow over time because the theory is either the use of utilities or the cost of utilities grow over time. Unfortunately, because of a couple of machinations, we're finding this to be a rather flat revenue source, but it's still a revenue source nonetheless. And Drew's going to explain to you one little hiccup on property taxes, and it's so complicated, it's boring as all get out, but he's going to explain it to you because I can't. Other challenges for the city is as we go out to look for people, good quality staff to support the work that you all want from us, we are competing against other cities. And in that competition, we have to be able to attract good employees, which means we need to provide good, solid benefits, solid compensation. And so that's the council is starting to struggle with that and try to make some smart decisions in that area. Third is what we call employee integration. Jesse Curion, the city's public works director, will talk to you soon about how he's going to take on something like, how many new employees? 12 new employees in his engineering team. Just trying to incorporate those new employees into how we do business and whatnot, you're going to likely have hiccups. You're going to likely slow down a little bit before you can speed up. So we just anticipate sort of a struggling as we bring people on board and then finally becoming more efficient. The other issue is the economic opportunity is now. The development cycle is high right now. This is when you want to staff up. This is when you want to get those good projects in the door. And the good project can be anything from Facebook to Commonwealth to your own desire to remodel your kitchen. They are all good projects. And for us to get to them all, we have to have enough capacity to take them on. And the issue with development cycles, many of you remember 2008 was not a good development cycle. It was a very tough time for most communities. So when we're working well, we should be investing well. If the cycle busts one day, and it will bust one day, we don't know when, but when it does, we want to be in the best position we can be so that we're at a higher tier than we were, say, in 2008. And finally, just Drew had mentioned a number of funds that we have, and there's a couple of what I'll call very small funds that were meant to be supported by investment. And by investment, I mean the money sitting in the bank, the interest paid on them was supposed to pay for the operating costs of the funds. Unfortunately, you know our investments, not our investments, everyone's investments are not very strong. We're collecting about 0.5% interest on our investments. You can't pay for a lot with 0.5% interest. So what we're finding is certain fund degradation. We're starting to eat into the principal of the fund, which isn't great, but in order to provide the services we want to provide, you got to use those funds. So I'm going to turn it back to Drew, and he's going to walk you through some of the details of the budget.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go through the 2015-16 budget and talk about a little bit about our forecast going forward. As I mentioned, total citywide budget next year is proposed to be $78.1 million. And that's a $6 million increase, or about 8% over last year. Citywide, about half of that amount is personnel costs, with the next quarter being operating costs, which would be big, large chunks of that are things like the water that we purchase for resale for our water district. So citywide, $78.1 million. Talk a little bit about our general fund, and you've seen this chart, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but total general fund is $49.3 million. So about 2/3 of the city budget is housed in the general fund. The big piece of that is personnel expenditures, like I mentioned. We're a service organization. 2/3 of your general fund is personnel. Is not out of line. You can see that in most jurisdictions. Cut differently, and again, I showed this in earlier. This is department expenditures. The police department is the largest chunk of the general fund at about 1/3, followed by public works at 17%, and then community services at 16%. So between those three, that's nearly 70% of the general fund is made up by those three departments. Revenues, we get revenues from a number of sources in the general fund. To mention, property taxes are largest at 1/3. Second largest would be charges for services, and that's a lot of that is services, our recreation services, as well as our community development planning and building permitting services. Other large revenue sources include our sales tax and our transient occupancy tax, which between the two, those make up another over 20% of our total general fund. So the 15-16 budget is very important. That's our spending plan for next year. In order to be a sustainable organization, we have to look out beyond next year as to what our revenues are going to do and how our expenditures are going to match up. And so what I wanted to go through is our long-term plan is only as good as our revenue assumptions. And I wanted to go through some of the key assumptions in our forecast that sort of looks out on the horizon for how we're going to be doing, not just this year, but on the go forward. So Alex mentioned it and queued it up nicely by saying how boring it is, but it's boring but important. So I mentioned the 12% share of property tax that we get. Right? So when county collects the property tax, we're supposed to get 12% of it. But about 20 years ago, when the state was having problems funding schools at an appropriate level, they took a portion of it. ERAF stands for Education Revenue Augmentation Fund. So they did what was called, they did an ERAF shift. They took our property tax money and put it into the schools. Fast forward about 10 years, and the amount that they were taking, which was formula driven, was actually more than what was needed to fund the schools. So we got a portion of that back, and that's what's called excess ERAF. So they take a big portion, and they give us some of it back in the form of excess ERAF. The problem is, and as the county describes it, and I think it's a good description, is they say, look, there's a lot of really smart people at the state that are trying to figure out how they can not give us this money. There's 3 counties as of last year that got it. San Mateo was the biggest. There are a couple of small counties that get this as well. So the county always recommends that we budget only about a 50% share, and so we budgeted 50% for next year, which is almost a certainty that we'll get at least that. And then we budget another 50% in the following year, and then 0% thereafter. So we really treat it as if it's a one-time revenue source. So if it does go away, we're not too exposed on that. Otherwise, property tax is doing very, very well. We're projecting strong growth based on the development that's going on in the area. Any of the in-process development that's far enough along to be able to project property tax is incorporated, including the Menlo Gateway project. Sales tax is a different story, as Alex mentioned. We've lost the car dealerships during the recession, and then more recently, we've lost 2 of our top 25 generators, or we've lost 1 and 1's on the way out. So we've put our revenue baseline down to reflect these losses, and we reflect really modest growth going forward. We do not expect sales tax to be a big revenue growth component for us on the go forward. And just as a historical piece, 15 years ago, sales tax revenue was twice as much as property tax. And now it's more than flip-flop. Property tax is $16 million a year, and sales tax is just over 5. So that's how much our revenues have shifted over the past 15 years. Transient occupancy tax, the hotel tax, on the other hand, is going very strong. Very good in the current year. Room rates are up, occupancy rates are up. We've got growth projected. The new Residence Inn that just opened has been incorporated in the projections, as has the Menlo Gateway Hotel. Utility users tax, Alex mentioned that as a concern. We get, I'll call it UUT, utility users tax, from 6 different sources. 3 sources we think are going to grow: gas, electricity, and water. 3 sources: wired telecom, wireless telecom, and cable TV, based on industry trends, we think are going to decline. So on the whole, we think this revenue source will be pretty flat. So when you take those 2 things together, sales tax with just very modest growth and UUT with very modest growth, it puts pressure on us to keep our expenditures in line. And then finally, development is booming, and we would be silly to project this development to go out into perpetuity, right? This cycle will change at some point. So we've got revenues and expenditures on the development side arcing upward over the next couple of years before they return to what we consider a more sustainable baseline on the go forward. But roughly, the revenues and the expenditures match, so they both move in concert with one another. So to the extent the cycle changes, they should move together. And with that, we will start our department operating programs, and I'll turn things over to Jesse Kirion, our Director of Public Works.
Good evening, everyone. As Drew said, I'm Jesse Kirion. I'm the Director of Public Works. I'd like to run through quickly with you tonight a few key elements about the Public Works budget. First of all, the Department of Public Works provides a series of services, some of which are highlighted include capital improvements, which will be things like water main replacements, improvements to City Hall space planning, street resurfacing, or any project that's greater than $25,000 that is generally a one-time development project. Additionally, we provide engineering services, which could be development related. It would be a review of any projects coming through the city. Maintenance, we provide maintenance for all of the city's vehicle fleets. We also contract with West Bay Sanitary District, and we maintain West Bay's vehicles, which is a service charge to the city. And we maintain all of the city buildings, including this building, City Hall, the libraries, the pools, and so forth. We also have a component of transportation and environmental. Transportation is 2-part. They provide overall transportation services for the city, including managing the city's traffic signal and street lighting contractor, and reviewing any development projects for the transportation component. Transportation also includes environmental, which is a city-wide service. It's everything from the installation of the solar panels, which you will see going in at City Hall, also right outside the Bellhaven Center here. We have a fenced-off area. It also includes managing all of the recycling and the garbage services for the city, power purchasing agreements, reduction of greenhouse gases, and so forth. Finally, we have our utilities division. And I'm sorry, those photos didn't line up with each other, but our utilities division oversees our Menlo Park Municipal Water District, as well as any groundwater wells, any management of our water system, so it's all things utilities. A few accomplishments that I would like to highlight for this past year. We completed a number of projects, including the El Camino trees replacement, a series of federally funded resurfacing projects, so that would be street and roadway resurfacing. We installed pedestrian enhancements, including lighted crosswalks at Oak Grove and Merrill. We completed the Sharon Heights pump station replacement, which is a stormwater replacement project. We also are working to complete the Trinity water main replacement, which is a seismic retrofit of a water main in Sharon Hills. And we have implemented the Willow Road and Middlefield Road traffic signal improvements, which provides better mobility for vehicles and enhanced pedestrian and bicycle safety components. Continuing over the next year, a few highlights that I would like to call out, one of which, again, is the environmental team. It's our power purchasing agreement. This would provide opportunities for users to purchase electricity from a vendor other than PG&E, so clean electricity charges. Also, the Sand Hill Road and Willow Road interconnect projects in the transportation world will better move or better handle traffic along those corridors through enhanced traffic signal communication. Another transportation highlight is the Valparaiso Corridor Safe Routes to School project, and this is in partnership with the town of Atherton. It will include the installation of green bike lanes along the corridor, lighted crosswalks, audible pedestrian signals along El Camino, so a number of very exciting enhancements. Finally, one other key highlight that I would like to call out is we will be moving forward with the water system master plan for next year. This includes all things water throughout the city. It includes groundwater, it includes surface water, irrigation wells, it includes our reservoirs for our water system. And this is basically like the general plan that you see us working through with the city, but this is the general plan for our water district. What is the best way to handle our water resources to continue to operate and provide the best service possible? So budget overview for Public Works. Public Works is comprised of a $20.4 million operating budget. That includes a number of funds. A component of our operating comes from the general fund at $8.5 million. We also have a component from the water fund at $7.9. And the water fund is a little bit different in the sense that is collected, as Drew said previously, specifically from Menlo Park Municipal Water District customers and is spent only on services providing for Menlo Park Municipal Water District customers. So it's a small segment of the city, but it's a very large component of our budget. Finally, one of the larger aspects is at $7.4 million. That's our personnel costs. So with any government agency, a large component of running services is providing staff for those services. Another component that is broken out but is within Public Works is our capital improvement plan. It's typically referred to as our CIP, which you may have heard last week. We discussed with the City Council the draft CIP. This year our draft CIP is at $8.7 million, and this is the very specific projects. I named a few earlier, but some other things that you may be aware of includes the initial design phase for the Chilco sidewalk project, it includes the solar projects, it includes additional street resurfacing, sidewalks, city hall space planning, so all of these large one-time enhancements. In order to accomplish all of these tasks, it takes people. Our department is at 68 FTEs, or full-time equivalents, this coming year. That is a change of 12.5 FTEs over last year. This is directly attributed to the growth of developments and our capital projects. So with new projects coming in, with new developments to review, both on engineering and transportation, it requires additional staff members. So what are the initiatives that we'll see next year moving forward with these staff? It includes space planning. We need to seat the additional staff members, not only in Public Works, but also in planning, in administration, and all other services at the City Hall admin building. We also expect to move forward with the enhancements to the downtown parking. There's been interest in modifying and changing some of the parking, the timing, so we will look at those components next year. Also, re-envisioning the Dumbarton corridor. What would we like the corridor to look like? Do we want to reactivate it as a rail, as a pedestrian, as a bike amenity? What do we want to do with that corridor? And that's one of the components for next year, one of the projects rather. Also, part of the water system master plan is the emergency groundwater wells. So in order to provide water services in the event of an emergency, say if our reservoirs were compromised, we need to have a way to provide water to all of the residents of the city. One of those ways is through the installation of emergency groundwater wells. We also have the Santa Cruz Avenue Sidewalk Project, which is a project that we have been working on over the last year, and we expect to begin construction sometime in 2016 and hopefully finish that project as soon as possible there following. I mentioned earlier the solar panel projects. We are moving forward with the installation of solar panels to provide clean energy for the city and to offset some of our operating costs. So we expect to finalize that project this year. And additional transit improvements. And transit improvements are very broad. There are things such as the El Camino corridor study. It could be Willow Road. What do we want the roadway to look like? It could be our interchange projects. It could be the TMAs, the Transportation Management Association, which is looking at all aspects of mobility in different segments of the city. And so that's very important to us this coming year, and it's also a council goal for the coming year. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Johnson.
Thank you, Jesse. As Jesse said, I'm Bob Johnson, Chief of Police for Menlo Park Police Department. I've been doing this for 29 years as far as law enforcement goes, and the one thing I know for a fact, if I had Jesse's hair, I would have really gone places in this profession. The police department for Menlo Park is a full-service law enforcement agency. Now that's important for you to understand because it means we offer pretty much everything that can be offered in a law enforcement capacity. We do that by breaking it down to 4 different areas. I'm going to highlight 3 of the ones that are really directly connected to the public, and that's patrol, investigations, and dispatch. Patrol is the most visible aspect of our department for the community. That's where we obviously offer law enforcement services, respond to calls for service. They do a phenomenal job responding to over approximately 22 to 25,000 calls of service a year. That's a lot of calls for such a small town. I mean, a lot of people, and you may have heard it referred to as a sleepy Menlo Park, but a lot happens in Menlo Park. And so they do a phenomenal job responding to that. Also under patrol is our traffic services detail. We have 2 full-time motor officers who ride motorcycles. You may have met them personally. If that's the case, I apologize, but they do a great job, do a lot of enforcement out there, and it's had a direct correlation in reducing our collisions in the past year since we re-implemented that service. We also have our community service program within that patrol division, and that's an area we've really kind of beefed up over the last couple of years. They're doing a phenomenal job in interacting with the community. They've been able to coordinate a lot of different things. They also oversee code enforcement, parking enforcement, traffic enforcement, but really the community interaction is the key to that division, and they've really done an amazing job in the last year, especially offering a community academy for residents of Menlo Park to attend, and we're recently involved in a youth academy where we have over 20 kids involved in that. It's been a 5-week program, and they graduate June 6th. June 6th is a day where you'll really see our community services out there doing a lot of different things. If you're not aware, that's the day we're having not only the Bellhaven Job Fair at the Service Center, we'll be involved in that, but we also have the Nativity Festival Carnival going on, as well as the Sunset Festival, and like I said, we have the graduation for the Youth Academy. So it's a very busy day for the people involved in that. Investigations is another thing that we offer, obviously. Investigations is made up of 8 detectives and 2 sergeants. 4 detectives handle all the cases that come into Menlo Park to be processed and investigated. About 4,500 cases a year come through that they process and file with the district attorney's office. The 4 officers that do that, the 4 detectives that do the case management. We're talking about all the cases that involved, domestic violence, all the way to rape, robbery, anything that you can imagine. And we also have 4 detectives that work our special investigation team. They're referred to as our narcotic enforcement team. They've been in place for several years. Another set of individuals that do an amazing job. They really specialize on a lot of the street level activity that cause the community a lot of disruption. And they do an amazing job, especially when it comes to drug dealers. And we divert them at times, depending on what's going on, whether it's gang violence or whatever. Well, they'll focus on that aspect, and they do a good job. I think they've done an amazing job over the last couple of years, because you can remember, especially in this particular community, the Bellhaven neighborhood historically has been known for gang-related shootings. And they had averaged about 12 to 13 gang-related shootings for many, many years. And we'll knock on wood or knock on each other, but the last gang-related shooting in the Bellhaven neighborhood was November of 2013. And a lot of that reduction is attributed to the narcotic enforcement team, in addition to our patrol efforts and our community interaction that's been going on. Dispatch is the one part of this department that a lot of people don't ever meet, but they speak to them on a regular basis. Dispatch is our communication center. They're the first point of contact for most residents. Anytime you call the police department, they're the ones that answer, somebody within that room. They do a phenomenal job, and Menlo Park, in my opinion, has the most tenured and most experienced dispatchers in the entire county. They're very, very, very good at what they do. In fact, they handle over about 40 to 50,000 calls coming to the dispatch center a year. About 11,000 of those are emergency 911s, and 98% of those they answer within 10 seconds. That's pretty amazing with everything they got going on, because there's a lot going on. You have to be very, very good at multitasking, and they're exceptional at what they do. We'll talk a little bit about that, what's going on in there. Well, I'll talk about it right now. Our dispatch is one of the most advanced in the entire county. Our communication center was recently renovated. A lot of technology was brought in. State-of-the-art equipment is brought in. We're positioned to be really the leader and the innovator in communication dispatch for years to come. We have a lot of things in place that'll be able to go online as soon as the state is ready, such as 911 texting capability, video 911. So there's a lot of things that technology is taking us to, and we're in a position to deal with it when it comes in. Some of the other accomplishments we've done that have been very public, as you know, body camera implementation. We were one of the first agencies in San Mateo County that outfitted the entire department. Every officer in Menlo Park Police Department has a body camera attached. We're also one of the first departments in the nation that I've been told that actually gave our body camera policy to an outside entity, our community advisory group, had them review it, provide input on what the community wanted out of our policy. So it's one of the most transparent body camera policies available. We're really proud of what the group did with the policy and the recommendation. And we adopted all the recommendations that the advisory group sent forward. That policy is online, as with all our policies, through our website. Taser deployment, another thing that went into play in the last couple of years. Every officer in Menlo Park Police Department now carries a taser. We did that primarily to give them another option, a less than lethal option. We're hoping that comes in. We're really in the pilot program of that, because we just this year actually outfitted the entire department. Last year was the pilot, where we only outfitted 7 officers and our sergeants to see how it would work, and we had analyzed it and recently deployed it throughout the department. Another thing that we just did this year, which goes into effect in June, is we did a department restructure, and we've implemented the rank of corporal. And that's an entry-level supervisor, which was in place for the first time for Menlo Park. It's going to be a great opportunity for our personnel, and it also gives us more supervision out in the field. So each team that's in patrol, our patrol division is made up of 4 teams that cover, obviously, the community 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. Each one of those teams have a sergeant assigned to them. Now they'll also have a corporal working within that team. So when the sergeant is off on, for whatever reason, the corporal will step in and be that acting supervisor, or will be a supervisor. So that's good. And like I mentioned, our policy is online. A lot of people think that should be commonplace, but it's really not for law enforcement agencies. If you go and look throughout San Mateo County, I believe we are one of just maybe 2 or 3 departments in the entire county that have our policy, our entire policy, accessible online. And I think it's something that will come for every agency in the near future. But we're trying to be the innovators out there. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. And those are a couple of the things we're doing. We have a large budget. As was mentioned, the second largest budget within the city, $16.5 million. But as you can see, vast majority of that is taken through the personnel cost. And that's a simple fact that we're a service-oriented agency. So that's what we do, is provide service, like I told you, whether it's through patrol, through investigation, traffic enforcement. So it's no surprise that most of our costs are personnel related. But the change that we have left over, the $3 million, that's what we use to actually operate out there. And that goes into a lot of different things on how we use that money. But that goes into the training of our personnel, the staffing of our personnel, as far as our part-time employees. And that's how we try to offset that 70 count. 70 full-time employees, you would think, well, that's a lot. 48 of those are sworn. So we have about half of those, or over half, about 30 officers that are actually assigned to patrol. And then if you take out the detectives, like I said, community service, the other thing. So you have about 48 officers. We do have 48 sworn officers providing law enforcement services throughout the city, which is sufficient. We have a good-sized department for this city. I've told the city manager that. I'm very comfortable with the staffing levels. We do a good job with what we have. But there's a lot to do, and how we offset that is through volunteers, through explorers. We have a strong explorer program. I will tell you, I'm extremely impressed, and explorers are individuals from 14 to 19 years old that want or have an interest in law enforcement. We bring them in, they go through an academy, then they become volunteers for us. We had the graduation last week for the recent Explorer Academy, and the Menlo Park Explorer was nominated as the top explorer for the entire academy, which is a very, very good honor. It's great to have it. So we have a lot of young people helping us out, and we also have some regular volunteers. And then we also have what we refer to as reserves. They're individuals that have been through a law enforcement academy, but they have other jobs. And they come and work for us when they're not at their other job, and they do law enforcement functions as well. So we offset that 70 with the help of others, and it's a great addition. The other thing that we offset it with is you, the community. A lot of you are involved in our neighborhood watch programs. You're our eyes out there, and that only strengthens our ability to do what we need to do to keep your neighborhood safe. That is growing tremendously in Menlo Park. We're having neighborhood watch groups pop up throughout the entire city, and so that's very beneficial for our efforts down the road. Some of the initiatives that we're doing moving forward, like I mentioned, we just implemented tasers for the department, and with doing that, we're providing quarterly reports back to the council to let them know the effectiveness, the amount of times we use it. And some people are wondering, well, how many times do you use a taser? We use a taser very rarely. Its greatest asset for us right now has been as a deterrent. People see that come out, it has a laser attached to it, and they see that red dot pointed at their chest. You'd be amazed at how quickly some people comply when they know that that thing is about to be deployed. And we usually, if we always can, give a verbal warning that you're about to be tased if you don't comply. So again, we're not using it on a traffic stop, hopefully. They're using it on high-risk, assaultive individuals. But again, it's worked very, very well for us as a deterrent rather than actually having it activated. I think last year during the pilot, we activated it 2 times. But we used it as a deterrent, many others. The police radio antenna replacement. One of the things that we have in place, and that's actually one of the CIPs that Jesse was talking about, you know, since we have our own communication center, you need an antenna to send calls out from radio to calls for service and everything that go from the headquarters to the car out in the field. We have an antenna in place and it works, but we also use a repeater off the fire district, one of the fire stations. What we're doing, and this project's been on the board for quite a while, is we're developing, we're going to construct a taller antenna, which will give us independent, free-range ability to communicate with our units. And there will be no, what we refer to as dead zones. And those are areas within the city that there's no reception. So we're trying to alleviate that problem. The online parking permits. I know a lot of people in the community have asked for this. We've been working on it for the past couple of years. We're hoping to have it in place by the end of this year. Parking permits for this city are very popular. People like to get them. and we're trying to make it easier to actually obtain them. So we're hoping to have that system in place by the end of the year. I already talked about text 911 capability. Again, that's something we're in position to do. We're just awaiting the state to actually get on board so everybody has the ability to communicate. The integration, you may have seen some of our new vehicles. We are converting from Crown Victoria Chevys to Fords. The SUVs, they're working out very well. 2014 and 15 were the first year we did this. A lot of people say, well, what do you need them for and why are you doing it? Well, a lot of it is because the Crown Vics are no longer being made for law enforcement purposes. So most agencies in the state are converting. California Highway Patrol, they're taking them on 100%. So you're going to see them, they're a little bigger, they're a little broader, they look good, but they also have a lot of practical use for us. They have more storage in the back, the ability for the computers. If you haven't been in a radio car, a police vehicle, just come by anytime and we'll show you. You'd be amazed at all the pieces of technology that have to fit into that front of that cab, and these work out very well for us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharice Brandel.
Hi everybody, Sharice Brandel, Community Services Director.
I think your mic is dead.
Oh, I'll turn it off. I'm loud anyway, probably don't need it. Hello? All right, what did you do, Bob? Thanks. All right, now you can hear me, right? I'm loud anyway, but better to have the microphone. I'm happy to be here to talk very quickly because I know we're starting to fade. It's been almost an hour now about the Community Services Department. We have a wide range of services that we offer to the community, recreation activities. Those are things like our gymnastics program, all the recreation classes that we offer here at the Onetta Harris Community Center and also on the other side of the freeway at the Arriaga Center. We have childcare and teen programs, including the Bellhaven Child Development Center, our Sky's the Limit program here at the Onetta Harris Community Center, senior services that happen here in this building, a very robust senior program. We provide the special events that you're used to seeing, including the egg hunts, both here in Bellhaven and on the Burgess campus, as well as the concert series, Music's in the Park. We'll have 2 of those concerts at Kelly Park this year, and 4th of July parade coming up. Everybody join us for that, those kinds of things. And Community Services also houses a portion of the budget for housing services, which we do in partnership with community development and staff in the city manager's office. Our highlights and accomplishments for the last fiscal year include a record of 730,000 participants in our programs. That's anytime somebody signs up for a program, they get counted in that 730, so some of them obviously are multiple people if you participate in multiple programs. But that does add up to 1.5 million participant hours. And participant hours are a way we measure the quantity of programming and activity that we're providing. Each hour that you spend in a program counts as a participant hour, and so we're up to 1.5 million. We do measure on a seasonal basis with all of our program participants and all of our programs how they're feeling about their experience based on criteria that align with our mission for our department. And a piece of our mission is whether or not we're creating a healthy community. And 97% of our participants feel that they are healthier due to their participation, so we're proud of that statistic. We also have been supporting the Bellhaven Action Plan. We're in the 2nd year of that program. That's led by Derek Schweigert and a couple of consultants that have been working for us. And many of you here in the Bellhaven neighborhood have been participating in that program. It includes our partnership with the Rotary for the Community Garden, as well as many community events, dialogues with the chief, youth diversion program we're partnering with the police department, and lots of other activity in the neighborhood. We also started this past year the Menlo Movie Series, which we'll be doing downtown on the Paseo in the fall, and we did start that last fall. We're also very proud of achieving 80% cost recovery, and Drew talked about this a little bit when he mentioned that Our services are supported mainly by user fees. 80% means that 80% of our services are covered by the fees that people pay. That's about $6.5 million of our $8 million budget. That's provided by the fees that we charge. And the 20% comes then from the general fund, about $1.5 million. The majority of the high cost recovery programs are the recreation kind of activities that include things like gymnastics is a high cost recovery program, the recreation center classes at the Arriaga Recreation Center are all high cost recovery, our Menlo Children's Center is a high cost recovery, and then many of the programs here in Bellhaven are lower cost recovery. That means the general fund supports them, including, what am I doing? It's blinking. Lower cost recovery programs include things like the Bellhaven Child Development Center, the Senior Center here, and the Onetta Harris Community Center. On this campus, those are all highly subsidized by the general fund. We also purchased a new mobile stage this year that we're quite proud of. It's a beautiful portable stage. You'll see it here on the Kelly Park campus for the Music in the Park events, but it'll also be downtown for the summer concert series. We're sharing it with the chamber for the Connoisseurs Marketplace, and it's a very high-tech, looks like a transformer, if anybody knows what one of those is. And then we did have an operational review of our department in the fall. It resulted in 60 recommendations that we needed to take our department from good to great, and we've implemented a number of those this year. As I said, we have an $8 million operating budget. Almost all of that does come from the general fund. $5.7 million pays for our 48.75 FTEs. We anticipate no changes for that number of staff in 2015-16, but the 48.75 does represent a 1.25 increase in this current fiscal year when the council approved an additional teacher and increasing a part-time position so that the Child Development Center here in Bellhaven could add more full-time child care slots at the CDC. Our initiatives for the coming year that we hope to use some of that $8 million on includes updating our strategic plan. That was a very important recommendation from our operational review. We're going to be improving our customer service, which includes focusing on improving our welcome. We want you to be greeted like you're going into a Walmart or some other store when you walk into one of our facilities. And we're going to be spiffing up our uniforms. No more flip-flops and ratty t-shirts right there. Well, all community services staff now will have staff shirts and be recognizable, and hopefully will be more present to help you. And then we're also going to be participating in a pro-Rogers benchmarking study. This will allow us to collect data and compare ourselves to the best community services and recreation departments across the country. It's a service that's facilitated by the National Parks and Recreation Society. Finally, we're going to be improving our marketing and outreach. The city is undergoing a graphic standardization and rebranding process that we're supporting in partnership with the Community Services, with the City Manager's Office, and we're really excited about getting our marketing and outreach looking as good as our facilities and hopefully our staff with their new uniforms. And then we're very excited also about transitioning the city's loan portfolio to a nonprofit organization that does housing services in the Bay Area, Hello Housing. The city has in the past offered 3 main categories of housing loans. We have a purchase assistance loan program. Hello Housing has been taking care of those loans since we eliminated our housing department in 2012. And we're going to be sending over to them our community development block grant loans and then the loans of our former redevelopment agency. And that'll help us manage those at a much higher level. And now we have our Linda Heineck to talk about community development.
Thank you, Cherise, and good evening to everyone. I am Arlinda Heineck. I'm the Director of the Community Development Department. The department is made up of two divisions, the planning division and the building division. And the planning division works within two service areas, long-range planning, which many of you will know as essentially the general plan. So the work we've been doing this past year on updating the general plan is a key feature of this service area. And then the second service area that planning embraces is current planning. And this is the review of individual development projects. And this is what we've seen absolutely skyrocket in activity over the last few years. The building division also performs a couple of services, primarily plan checking and issuing building permits that is then followed up with inspection services. And the focus of the building division is really to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public by ensuring that buildings meet all applicable codes. The accomplishments this year include the work we've done to date on the general plan update. As many of you know, we've had numerous public meetings and public workshops. We've produced a lot of new data and analysis, and we're moving forward with now trying to identify the new land use alternatives that will be studied in the EIR. Second, we've implemented a number of housing element programs, and that includes an annual report that was provided to the state this year, as well as participation in a multi-jurisdictional regional nexus study that will set the city up for considering changes in its below market rate and affordable housing programs. We have completed a number of large-scale development projects, including the new Facebook 20 building project, several residential and mixed-use projects along El Camino Real, the new Marriott Residence Inn, which should be opening any day now, and Beechwood School. And as we've completed those, we're continuing work on a number of other development projects. We've received approximately 90 new requests for development projects this year. It looks like we'll be issuing about 800 building permits this year and conducting about 10,500 inspections. Finally, we've launched a new interactive GIS website that allows for the public to have 24/7 access to parcel-specific information, such as zoning and flood status. The department's budget is $5.1 million, all coming from the general fund, and $3.1 million of that is in personnel costs. In this proposed budget, we are looking for an increase of 5.25 new staff members, absolutely necessary to meet the development demand that we've been seeing for the last couple of years. And by increasing staff, we will partially be able to reduce some of our expenses that we've had in planning and plan check contract services. We have found over the years that those tend to be very, very expensive services compared to having in-house staff. Our initiatives for next year, we're going to continue work on the general plan update with a goal of completing that work in the summer of 2016. We're going to continue to pursue some of our housing programs, which includes completing this regional nexus study that we're participating in, and then really looking at how we may want to make some changes to the city's below market rate and affordable housing programs. We will be conducting the third year review of the specific plan. We're going to continue processing development projects in a timely manner. Hopefully the new staffing will help with that. And then finally, we're going to work with other departments to continue to pursue some technologies to help us increase efficiencies and to increase transparency and the ability to create more self-help options for the public. And with that, we will move to the library.
Good evening, I'm Susan Homer, I'm the Director of Library Services, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the library. Maybe. Our library services are divided into 5 particular divisions. Adult services are the reference desk, the people who select the materials that are in the library, the people who help you with the questions that you have in the library, our adult programming. Youth Services does the same thing. They select materials for youth from infant to teenager. They also have many special programs that they offer to our youth, including our teen club, our story times, and our special activities such as the summer learning program. Circulation, those are the people who help you get your materials in and out of the library. We've implemented a lot of self-check-in and self-check-out options in the library. Those help us become more efficient to get the materials back into your hands a lot quicker than we could before. Technical services. Those are the people who are in the bowels of the library who actually take the materials that we order, they put them into a catalog system, they process them, they put tags on them, and they get them up into circulation. And then we have our Belhaven branch, which is right over here at the Belhaven School. And they do the same things that we do in the main library. They have adult services, youth services, circulation services. The only thing that they do not do is they do not process their own materials. They're all done at the main library. Last year, in total, we circulated 675,000 items from both of our libraries, which is a phenomenal amount of material going in and out. What we did this past year, we enlarged our collection of e-books. E-books are one of our newest growing items of circulation. We have a new collection of over 4,000 audio e-books, which are now only available to member cardholders. It means that you don't have to wait in line for 10 more circulations before you finally get your e-book. We also have a great collection of quick picks, and we call quick picks those items that are on the New York Times bestseller list, the Chronicle bestseller list, whatever it is. And we have 400 of those now. That collection is actually paid for by our library foundation. And what they've done is, because those are such popular items, they circulate far more heavily than any other item in our collection. We've added 2 new story times, so we have 10 story times a week. We now have Munchkin music, where the kids get up and dance and play musical instruments. And we have preschool story time. Just like the Community Services Department, we had an organizational review this past year. That is completed, and we're working on implementing the recommendations from that review. And the library actually has a huge volunteer force. We have people who contribute 1.75 FTE in their work for the library. They help us with shelving materials, they help us with processing materials. They're the people who will be wearing a big badge saying volunteer in the library. We could not do it without them. The library budget this year is $2.9 million in operating budget. We are primarily a general fund operation of the city, as we said before, and our personnel cost is $2.1 billion. We are personnel. We're the people who help you find the materials in the library. And in the proposed budget for 15-16, we are asking for a quarter position more, which will mean that we actually have 4 full-time division supervisors in the department. That's one of the recommendations that came from our organizational review. What we're going to be doing in the next coming year is we are going to be doing a comprehensive strategic planning process. Our last strategic planning process completed several years ago, and so we're going to embark on a new process to help us direct the library for the next 5 years. This year, for the first time, we're actually having a summer learning camp at the Belhaven Branch Library. This is going to be an intensive 8-week summer camp. 20 children are going to be involved, primarily those going into 3rd grade. They'll be there for 8 weeks for 4.5 hours a day, breakfast and lunch provided. We're also looking at new services for the Belhaven Branch as part of the outcome of our strategic plan and our operational review. We're doing what we call non-place-based services. So instead of having you come into the library, we're taking the library out into the community. So you'll be seeing more things going on with that. And we are also looking forward to a project that is going to expand our automated materials handling system, giving us 3 more bins, which doesn't sound really exciting to non-library people, but for us it's tremendously exciting. And our exterior landscape at the main library is going to be renewed. So that's going to be a great change for the way the library looks. Finance.
Okay, I'm back. So what does finance department do? We do provide a number of services. We annually do all of our accounting and produce our annual financial report, the comprehensive annual financial report. We partner with the city manager's office to produce the annual budget. We handle all of our money. We do the investments, we do cash management, we do revenue management. One of the big aspects of that is running our business license program. We have about 5,000 active business licenses in the city that generate about $1.6 million in revenue annually. We do purchasing and accounts payable. We make about 4,500 vendor payments annually. We do bi-weekly payroll for all of our permanent and temporary staff, and that equates to about 11,000 paychecks or direct deposits annually. And then we handle risk management with the partnership of Joint Powers Association. So highlights, we just tied up an upgrade of our financial system. We moved it to a new platform that's more stable and provides more reporting capability. Last year, we got the Government Finance Officers Award of Excellence for our comprehensive annual financial report. We rolled out online business license software, so for the last renewal cycle, and we had about 21% of folks renew their business license online. And we made an important progress in our payroll upgrade project to make sure that our payroll system could communicate with our financial system. So our budget in finance is $3.8 million. $1.6 million of that is the general fund, and about $1.2 of that is personnel costs. Our budget is what it is because we get significant funding to pay for workers' comp claims and insurance, and we also pay for the city's general liability claims and insurance out of the finance department budget. We have 8 head count, including myself in the department, and that's no change from last year, or the current year, excuse me. And then what do we have going on? We are looking at refinancing the redevelopment agency debt. We have about $60 million in outstanding bonds, and we're looking to refinance it for 2 purposes. 1, we believe we can save some money, and 2, we can reduce some of the risk that's involved with our particular debt issuance. So we're getting that underway now. We want to do some outreach on the business license renewals. I mentioned we had 21% renewals in the first cycle. We want to do much better than that in the next cycle, get more people renewing online. We're going to continue working on getting our employees on electronic time cards. My department's on right now. The library's working on it, and we're going to keep rolling that out over the course of next year. And then we're going to partner with community development to see if we can streamline some of the developer fee billings on the go forward. And with that, I'll turn things over to Gina.
Thank you, Drew. I'm Gina Donnelly, City's HR Director. So for an HR nerd like myself, it's very exciting to sit here and hear about all the new initiatives and the things that have been accomplished by the departments in the city. For the most part, certainly we do interact with the community directly, but really my customers are the departments themselves and the employees. So it's great to see that a lot of these accomplishments and the things that we're able to help support them in doing. So what does human resources do? So very much like other companies' HR services, certainly compensation administration, employee relations. What is different a little bit for public sector than private sector is the labor relations aspect. Not a lot of unionized shops anymore in private sector, but for public employers up and down the state, about 90% unionization. So that's an interesting component that you don't have to deal with in the private sector. So employee relations, of course, very, very important, dealing with things like fair employment, workplace, positive workplace relationships. There's a lot of mandatory compliance issues, but the labor relations, again, is just a whole other aspect of that. So they really are 2 different categories. Organizational development, so reinvesting in our own workforce, training opportunities, development of our own employees, and helping to really build our bench so that we have the next generation lined up and ready to take over the services and really take them to the next level. And then finally, safety and workers' compensation. So again, another very regulatory area when it comes to workers' compensation, lots of laws to comply with, but on top of that, really safety is more the preventative aspect of it. So again, going back to training and making it a really safe, as safe a workplace as we can make it, safer by the day if we can, and working with our employees to make that happen. So some of our accomplishments and highlights. Conducted 30 recruitments. Thankfully, 16 of those were promotions. So again, we're working to really build the bench within our own workforce. We also have 14 new hires as well, to date. Organized 2 employee recognition events. So currently certainly over the years, employee recognition has been an important part of Menlo Park. But I think our current city manager has really taken it to another level to really make sure that we recognize all of our employees, not just the ones that are doing extraordinary things, but all the employees that come in, day out, and get things done. We certainly don't want those people to be taken for granted. Implemented new memorandums of understanding. So those are those union contracts that we were talking about. So we did have to renegotiate those things from time to time, so we were able to get 3 of those over the goal line. And then restructured administration of our healthcare benefits. Things are changing in the healthcare world, as you know, as most of you probably noticed. Healthcare has grown exponentially in the cost, and one of our goals is to certainly provide the best benefits we can, but to also controlling those costs. So making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck that we can in the area of benefits for our employees, and doing that in a cost-effective manner. Our budget overview, so $2.4 million budget, $1.4 million of that being from the general fund. $1.3 million of our costs is personnel costs, so we're a small but very effective staff. And funding for workers' compensation and retiree medical funds, so we do have to administer that as well, which is not necessarily personnel costs per se, but things that we passing on, going on through the process in terms of the full employment picture that we have for our employees. We have 4.75 FTEs, full-time equivalents. That's up 1.25 from last year, or the current year, because those were positions that were just recently, there was an increase of 1.25 in April. And necessary to support all of the staffing initiatives that we have coming up on the horizon. So, initiatives. So we have, we've started the process of automating our human resources information system. So a lot of these processes have been done manually in the past, and we can create a lot of efficiencies and free up some staff time by automating those functions. A master city policy manual. So certainly city policies often need to be looked at, updated, and sometimes you find a policy that you didn't know that you needed, and now you do. So we're in the process of trying to create a comprehensive policy manual that will be available online to the employees, but especially to the public. The Affordable Care Act compliance, so ACA, also known as Obamacare in the media, is an important compliance aspect that we have to be ready for. We're taking steps to do that. And then also a new supervisor training. So again, as we hire and we continue to promote, we want to make sure that those employees have the skill sets that they need in order to be successful in our organization. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Steve.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Starla Robinson, and I'm the Assistant City Manager speaking on behalf of the City Manager tonight. He'll correct me if I say anything incorrect. So the City Managers, whoops, I got a little carried away there. Just trying to be efficient for you guys. Right. So initiatives in the City Manager's office, services include city administration, city clerk, information technology, and economic development. And I think what probably characterizes our group more than the other groups is that we prepare the agenda for the City Council and some of the policy options for the council. And the city clerk takes the minutes for the meeting. So much of our effort is focused on the city council meetings themselves. And then in addition, we have information technology, and that is a unit that really provides assistance to all the departments. So all of the technology initiatives you heard about tonight are really bolstered by that IT group. And economic development is managed by Jim Kogan, who's standing back there. And he sees himself as the concierge services manager for businesses in the city of Menlo Park. Accomplishments of this last year would include upgrading the technology in the city council chambers, which included actually getting technology installed 20 years ago to finally work. We've enhanced the IT infrastructure, which is really code for improve the hardware of our IT services. Economic development has a trial project downtown for enhanced seating program, so it'll be on the agenda, on an upcoming agenda, and they refer to it as parklets, but it's really to add seating outside to create economic vitality downtown. Enhanced communications, and then in addition, and the enhanced communications is really a citywide team effort led by the same Jim Kogan and Clay Curtin, the assistant to the city manager, to improve our ability to communicate to the public what's going on in City Hall. And the city clerk was successful in completing the 2014 municipal election. An overview of our budget includes the fact that our budgets for all of the services I just addressed, a $3.3 million operating budget, $2.2 million of that is general fund, and $2.1 million of that is in personnel costs, because most of what we do is direct service. We are proposing adding, our total FTE count is 12.5, including all IT and economic development activities. And we're proposing adding an additional FTE in IT this year, because I don't think we've added any positions in IT in about 15 years, and technology has moved forward quite rapidly. Initiatives for the coming year include undertaking and completing a classification and compensation study, again, which has probably not been done in 30 years. Completing the economic development strategic plan and implementing it. Developing public benefit policy recommendations, and that'll be a joint effort of economic development and community development and the city manager's office. Continued system enhancements to our IT infrastructure, and then bringing online the Form 700 filings that most public officials are required to complete. So the city attorney's office is included in our budget. I am not a lawyer, but I will play one for the moment. Services of the city attorney's office include providing, Bill McClure is our city attorney, and has been for 25 or 30 years, which is a phenomenal heritage and institutional memory for our organization. We can go back to Bill and ask him almost any question, and he'll know the answer. So he serves as the city's chief legal officer, and his duties are actually outlined in the municipal code, because Menlo Park is a general law city. He also oversees outside counsel, so if we have some kind of litigation going on, he may not be directly involved, but he manages that litigation. And his primary function is, in addition to that, is to provide advice and representation to the city council, city manager, staff, boards, and commissions. That doesn't mean we can ask him a personal legal question. That just means that in all city-related matters, he's the go-to guy. And he also, and I'm sure this is really one of the favorite parts of his job, reviews all contracts. Highlights of this last year would be his work on the housing element update. He's also instrumental in large below market rate housing acquisition projects. He deals with complex land use issues and any election matter issues. A quick overview of his budget will show that he has a roughly $500,000 operating budget. Of that, $370,000 is in the general fund, and the rest of it is probably largely funded by the workers' comp and general liability funds. We also have legal budgets in human resources and community development department budget, which again, he's involved in any litigation that in either of those departments, or even oversight of the legal work that's being done. Initiatives for the coming year will include his continuing to work on the general plan update. He's involved in development projects, including major below market rate housing projects, labor relations, and policy development for the city council. And that's the city council. Oh, sorry. Did you get all that? Okay, city council, we have 4 city council members and a mayor that turns over year to year. Accomplishments of this last year include adoption of a water conservation ordinance because of the drought, implementation of the community garden on city land in partnership with Rotary, development of the Belhaven Action Plan, international connections, which means that the council has been very involved in friendship and or cultural agreements with communities in Japan, Ireland, India, and China. And they've also been very involved in the General Plan Advisory Committee. Quick overview of their budget will show that the total operating budget is $425,000, all of which is in the general fund. But it's a little misleading to say it's $425,000 because $175,000 of that is really for community funding. We go through an annual grant process, and the council authorizes $175,000 plus or minus in community initiative budgets. So next steps on the budget. I think Mr. McIntyre would like to handle that.
Thank you. I'm going to make a bad joke. I told the department heads they all had 3 minutes apiece. They cannot follow instructions apparently, and I apologize about that. Second of all, apparently I need to invest in air conditioning in this building, which we will figure that one out too, and I apologize about that. Next step, so as I mentioned to you guys all at the very beginning, this process really is the city manager's recommended budget. It is done, and by that I mean this is what's going to the council. On June 2nd, a week from tonight, 7 p.m., the city council will hold a public hearing. I gotta warn you, the public hearing will probably be a little bit later. In other words, probably more like 8, 9 o'clock. I'm not sure how late it's gonna be. In other words, don't show up at 7 expecting to have your comments known. Please feel free to email, call, attend the public hearing, whatever you want to do. If there are things in the budget you find you want to modify, amend, or have the council change, next Tuesday night's the night the council can change the budget, and we will bring it back on June 16th for adoption. So if there's any change, and that's why we wanted to do the budget workshop in advance, is let you guys think about what we're presenting, and you guys can start thinking, well, wait a minute, something's good, something's bad, something's right, something's wrong. So please feel free to join us next Tuesday night, offer your comments either by participating at the at the podium, or like I said, you can submit your comments in writing as well. I know it's a major commitment to do that. We will answer any questions about the budget as it's been presented to you. Happy to do so. I realize the hour is late, but I do certainly want to make sure you feel free to ask me and or any of the department heads questions about what you've heard tonight. And if not, thank you for your time. But I'm happy to take questions.
The $4.8 million surplus in, I think it was 2013-ish when it occurred.
Correct.
What were some of the instances that drove that number that may or may not be good?
A couple of things. We had a couple of one-time revenues that came in. One of the things that occurred in 2013 was the expiration of the redevelopment agency. So that created a one-time push of monies coming in the door. The city had also sold some land that created a one-time funding source. And I'm not sure if I'm remembering all the other big details about the 4.8 million operating surplus.
We got a full share of excess ERAF.
Oh, we got the full share of excess ERAF, which Drew had mentioned before. So a couple of good things occurred and put us in a really good position. And part of it was also what we call salary savings. We couldn't fill positions, so those positions went budgeted, but unexpended. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Cheryl?
I was wondering, you mentioned developing a public benefit policy recommendation. So does that mean recommendations to the public benefit policy that already exists? Or is there no public benefit policy?
So I think, the question has to do with the council's ongoing search for a perfect definition of what public benefit means. And public benefits is what we attach to major developments when something goes through. And the idea that I will pick on Facebook just because we're in their backyard right now. When Facebook comes in with its big project, what might Facebook do to benefit the public, to provide benefits locally in exchange for building whatever it is they're building? I think, Cheryl, the council has struggled with trying to define exactly not what public benefit is, how much should be sort of credited back to the city, much less back to the developer. And the council is still struggling with that. Staff continues to work to try to find great definitions so that people can have a clear expectation of what that means, whether you're a resident or a developer.
And
Sure.
this goes with that, the development impact fees. Is there a place I can go to see how they are specifically allocated, i.e. how much went to staff time? And then if something is going to a capital improvement project, specifically where that, project is located? Because as a resident, it's kind
Sure.
of hard to tell where the money is going.
Absolutely, and again, that's why we're doing the budget workshop here tonight, is trying to help residents better understand how this works. We did our capital improvement plan last week. It too is a large, lengthy plan that does identify, I think it will answer all your questions that you may have about how certain funds are attributed to certain projects, then how certain funds are derived from certain projects. I would encourage you to sit down if you have time with Jesse Curion, our Public Works Director, who essentially owns the CIP. He'll be able to walk you through it more closely to the extent you want to do so. Jesse, it is online, the CIP?
It will be as part of the budget document.
Okay, so the budget document has attached to it the CIP as well. And it's one of those things where, and I don't mean to be offensive when I say this, but you sort of have to sit down and just start pouring through it and figure out, okay, where's the money coming from? Where is it going to? How is it being allocated? And we are more than happy to help anyone with questions they would have on that.
And I'd be able to maybe look and say, if I wanted to see in Bellhaven, how much of this money went here. I'm assuming there's some way to sort through
Historically or prospectively?
both ways.
Historically, I think we could help you figure that out. It may require us to step in to sort of show you the source documents, because even though we have historical CIPs, capital improvement plans we've adopted, we may not have actually implemented some of the projects yet. So there is a backlog of CIPs, and I couldn't tell you specifically. Jesse knows where they all live and where they would be, whether the improvements in Bellhaven, in West Menlo, in Sharon Heights, or wherever else it might be.
Because with all of the development happening, you know where I'm going.
I know where you're going,
We're
yes.
bearing so many impacts, but
Correct.
so many residents are saying it's very, very hard to see where these capital improvements are.
Well, again, one of the goals of having this meeting here tonight was in recognition of the ask from some of the Bellhaven residents saying, we want to know more, we want to better understand. So I said, let's bring the meeting here. And instead of having everyone shipped across town, I brought the staff here this time. So partially that's what we're trying to do here tonight, and point you in the direction of where you can get more information so you're more comfortable with what we're talking about. Yes?
Is it actually possible to have that a public document? Because that, I think, would be very interesting to many people in the city.
You mean the budget itself?
Well, no, how is the money being allocated across the city to various communities? Seems like it would be of interest to many people.
We could do a geographical analysis that shows what I'm going to call revenue production versus investment back. I think the one thing that's difficult to do then is no one neighborhood, and I know what you're going to say when I say this, but no one neighborhood should generate $1 million and it has a right to spend that $1 million. We are one city trying to make one city as good as possible. I know exactly what you're going to say, that a lot of the developments are hitting this part of the city, and I completely anticipated that question. So we can get you that information, and again, it may take some time sitting down with somebody who wants to take the time to sit down with us, and we can walk you through that. And I don't mean to say that offensively. We can give you documents, certainly.
Does it exist though? I mean, you're saying you can walk me through it, so that I'm presuming it exists, in a concise manner already somewhere.
We have started to do this GIS, Geographic Information Service process, where we can show where revenues are generated by sort of chunk of land, so to speak. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's sort of what I'll call the superficial snapshot, which is a good start. And then, like I said, we can start drilling down if we need to drill down. It may be harder to show the reverse investment back, not just on the CIP, not on the public improvements necessarily, but on the services. So, but we can have those conversations, and happy to do so. Yes.
But just to push a little
Sure,
bit more,
sure,
it
sure.
would be very useful to have it for all the people, the public to see, so that you don't have to repeat this conversation with individuals.
Agreed.
Just,
Once
you
we
know,
generate
it'd be
it,
nice
we
to have it out
can
there.
make it available. I agree. The thing you're asking for doesn't exist yet in a document form. It's something we'd have to create.
It seems like something that would be very worthwhile for you folks to know as well, not just the community.
Before we meet with the.
Generally, a yes to answer that question, except again, with the theory is we're trying to make one city great here. And the one city great is whether it's all the way on the west side of town or all the way on the east side of town, we tend to be east west town. So,
No, we want it all to be great, but I think if we don't really know what's happening, we can't locate where we need to improve or not. So we're just saying, can we just see the information?
Well,
That's all.
and taking that comment, that also goes for the city staff, it would seem, as you're developing your budget, it would be useful for you to be able to see.
Because they can make better
right. And
recommendations
I
to the
think
council.
the distinction here is, as of this moment, we don't make decisions or recommendations based upon, Sharon Heights generated 50% of the property tax, therefore we should reinvest that 50% back into Sharon Heights. I think the idea is, how do we, we can show all that, but it may or may not inform a council's ultimate decision on how to adopt the budget.
I'll just give a hypothetical if I may. I'm making up numbers. City gets in $10 million from Facebook, we've negotiated this. So what I'm trying to say is, okay, then where did it go? Did it go to cover new staff, all of it, or did a certain percentage actually, are there things we can point to in the region and say it funded this project, this improvement, so on and so forth?
Okay.
And that's all I'm saying, because I want to see all of Menlo Park great too, and that's why I keep on kind of riding that one.
I think we can do that. The hard part about, let's take Facebook. And let's say Facebook, they didn't do $1 million this year, but let's say they did $1 million this year because of the East Campus and the West Campus. So there's $1 million coming into the general fund, and that's funding citywide services, everything from A to Z, nuts to bolts, right? We walked through that whole process. Because the $1 million is blended with the 48 point whatever other $1 million, I'm not sure I can segregate it out and say if Facebook didn't come here, what would be different? It's kind of blended as one funding source, so it's hard to isolate it and say, here's what this $1 million would buy you otherwise. I'm not
So you're saying everything they give just goes into the general fund,
correct.
basically?
For the development agreement, the operating revenue that we get from that. There are mitigation monies they have given to the city to improve this intersection, to put a street light here. There are very specific things that are outlined in the CIP that Facebook is still working on.
And because I guess the reason I bring it up again is because I know it mentioned like the Chilco street improvements. Now, the only money that I'm aware of was $50,000 that a resident got up and advocated for,
Right.
and then the developer threw in an additional $50,000 on top of what the city was already requiring. So once again, it's just trying to get a clearer picture of where the money is going, how it's being allocated, and where the improvements are, because I'm thinking, this is years after those two people got killed on that little segment of Chilco, and we're still talking about getting a plan.
Right.
And so, as a resident, it gets to be, it starts to sound like a broken record, and I've looked at budgets a few years, and I've noticed how sometimes the money is pushed out so far in terms of the improvements that are happening here. But yet the money keeps coming in, the buildings are going up. I can barely get out of town because of the traffic. And so that's the only reason I'm saying it would help everybody make better decisions. The council, the staff, the staff can give the council better direction. Because a lot of the time I start to wonder, do they even get a chance to really read all the information you provide?
So, a couple of points you made, which is exactly what we've been saying back to the council, and then not to pick on the council here, but we've been taking in and making promises for a lot of work to be done, but have not had the resources to do the work, frankly. It's really simple. And the pipeline's only this big, the expectation's this big. Either we shift the expectation back down to what we can do based on existing staff, or we enhance the capacity, which is what Jesse and Arlinda are doing with regards to asking for more staff so we can get more work done. So that's, using Chilco as a great example. Chilco, it is in this year's CIP, as I recall, this year meeting coming up. So the plan will be done. The $50,000 is going to pay for the planning of what Chilco could look like. Then we got to figure out how to fund the balance of whatever those improvements are going to be. Now, it's fair to assume Facebook will be a big player in that, because Facebook's going to continue down Chilco on one side, and then the train tracks on the other side. until it wraps towards Bayfront Expressway. So there's a lot of pieces in this that you sort of have to keep track of, and that's what we try to do. To the extent we can do a better job, frankly, of helping the neighborhood understand what we're doing, or frankly, all the residents understand what we're doing. It's hard, but we want to do that. So that's why I'm saying sometimes sitting down and just working through it so that candidly, if you can become an ambassador of the city budget and say, let me explain it to you all, not you, anyone of you who wants to take this on, we're happy to do so. It's tough, it's complicated.
Well, I was just wondering, which budget is online that you can go see right now?
This one's online, you can see right now.
Okay, because I saw one, and that was the one that I kind of made some comments before about. And the thing about it is that what I thought was going to happen is that that's what we were going to be seeing, was that budget, those bar charts, those pie charts, all those things that divide everything up, show you exactly where things are going, show you how much is going where and how much is going where, so you can actually see it in a visual, you get a visual picture where things are going. You don't have to really say it, but you can actually see it because it's right there in front of you. And also the budget also that I walked into when it was in the city council chambers, it was also talking about what was allocated to the school districts, different things like that. Those are the things that I would like to know. Those are the things that I would like to.
We actually did that. We will put this PowerPoint online. We actually did that earlier tonight. We showed the whole breakdown of the budget, funding sources, expenditure categories and whatnot. So maybe that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think that
we can provide that to you as well. To be really clear, this budget, the one we're talking about right now, was just produced last week. So anything you saw before last week is what I'm going to call the current year's budget, the year we're in right this minute. So that was just, if that helps, depending on when you happen to look online.
Okay.
Alex, you mentioned in the estimated revenue for this next year should be 47.5 net surplus with, or expected to be 2.1 million in excess of what your expenditures are. And the 5-year forecast, you're expecting about 3.1 million in excess revenues. That money is obviously going into, call it the rainy day fund.
Mm-hmm.
There was no mention in the budget analysis that you did of where our current rainy day fund is, what the reserve is, how the reserve is looking. I know you said you were going to have to tap into the reserve for expenditures coming up.
Right.
There's no mention of what's in that rainy day fund.
So it's all available online. It's in those books back there. Again, we were trying to keep this as high level as possible without, because we'd be here through the whole night. So the reserves, the city savings account, as it were, we have a 10-year, 5-year listing of the past reserves plus future.
No, we don't list that.
The reserve, so it's not there. Okay.
So we closed last year with about $28 million. So
Okay.
we expect to close this year in the general fund with about $30 million. 18 of that is committed to various, 18 of that's committed to various council-funded reserves, contingency reserves, pension funding reserves.
So 18 million is allocated already?
Yeah, it's committed to other sources. That's the top of my head. And then some of it is, not all of it is unrestricted rainy day money, I guess is my point. I'd be happy to walk through that with you if you'd like, about what's available for them to spend and what they've committed for specific purposes.
More questions? More questions? Yes.
Clarification question. So you're saying that on the CIP that's currently available online, it shows Facebook's mitigated fundings and where specifically that was?
No, actually, I don't think it does. So the major developer projects
are included in the CIP, but it's not broken out by the developer contributing to the project. They go into the pot of transportation and impact fees. The fees are assigned to specific projects. So the information that you're asking for is there, but it's not tying Facebook to the project.
Okay. Will there be any clarification of that sort, or do we just need to come to meetings and ask?
That would be something we could sit down and explain with you. It's not typical that it's broken down in that manner, but I'm certainly happy to sit down and explain it to you.
We realize this stuff gets complicated, and that's why, again, we're happy. We really want you to try to understand this the way we understand it. It's just, there are so many moving pieces to it that it can be overwhelming at times. And we don't mean to say that to offend anyone. We're saying it the other way around. We want you to understand this. We want you to be able to help the council better understand it. Yes?
I looked at the CIP, and what I was not clear on, and this is specifically the Santa Cruz Avenue sidewalks, there's $1 million in the budget in the CIP for that. What does that cover? And I'm not specific, I mean, you don't have to be specific about that, but just for a CIP project. Is that something that is just for 1 year? Does it complete the project? It's very unclear.
So different projects have different funding sources. The Santa Cruz sidewalk project is a unique project in the sense that it's a one-time installation project, and so the $1 million that is in place is just an estimate. We originally started with $600,000 when the project was originally developed. It was only on the north side of the road. Now that it's expanded to both sides of the road, we did increase the cost, and we also took into consideration cost escalation. So what that includes is the staff time associated with the project, the consultant time to design the project, and the construction to build the project. However, again, it is just an estimate. Until we finalize the design, we won't know what the hard numbers are, but we feel that that's more accurate representation than the 600 that we had previously.
So the anticipation is that that would be the entire project to complete it?
That's correct.
And that the hope is that it would be done next year?
That's correct, next fiscal year.
More questions? Yes?
Can you explain to me where the budget pool is? Bellevue until it's closed half the time. Like on a weekend, Memorial Day, Christmas, during lab hours. And I brought that up to several people and they said, well, it's problematic. It's managed by downside.
So yes, yes, and yes. That's all true statements. The person you want to talk to is sitting right next to you. She knows it in detail. And the problem is I can't show it to you specifically, but I have a feeling Sharice would be able to help you understand how the pool setup works. It has been privatized, for lack of a better term. So there's a private operator who runs the pools on our behalf. The good news about Bellevue and the pool, it is programmed much more so than it has been in years past. So we're getting much more use out of it, whether it's sufficient for, well, and please talk to Sharice about that, because I think these are the things we need to hear about.
And also the library is not.
Bellevue Library or the downtown library?
The library here is wonderful, and the staff, the hours are just limited. So it's not open in the morning, it's
Right.
not open in the
So these are great things to share with the city council that they need to hear.
I've written
Good.
surveys.
Keep
and
writing.
I email.
Keep writing and keep calling. And I don't mean to say, we will take the message as well, please don't get me wrong on this. The more the council hears about the desire for greater library services, the more they'll say, well, Alex, what's going to take open the library longer? And I'll say, we need more 1, 2, and 3, whatever those things might be. And because it's a shared library, it's a little complicated with the Bellevue School, but we've had markedly improved relationships there, so. Great. Any other questions? If any of you has questions of me, you can easily find me online. Please send me questions. My goal is to have you all understand this to the extent you either can or want to. You don't need to be a budget expert, but I'd sure like you to walk away and say, okay, I got a little better understanding of what's going on. To the extent we need to put more out there to get you more information, we'll do so. You just need to tell us what you want. It's 5 to 8. I had no idea this would go on this long, but I'm so glad you all showed up. I'm so glad you stayed through it all. And please, if you have more questions, again, next week, June 2nd, 7 o'clock, and the adoption will be June 16th, roughly at 7 o'clock as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.